Okay, I have it. Awesome. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I think we might wait just one more minute or like 30 more seconds for a few more people to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. But thank you all for
Okay,
being
great.
here. I think we can go ahead and get started. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. Welcome to the third session of our Living Safely with Lead webinar series. Today, we're going to be focusing on lead in soil and dust. So, for anyone who is a repeat attendee, thank you so much for going to the previous sessions as well. I am still going to start with giving a quick introduction about Clean Water Action, our lead hazard awareness program, and then I'll introduce today's speaker. And then also, if you don't know me, my name's Mercedes. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an environmental health organizer at Clean Water Action. And then after the presentation, I'll kick it over to Adrian Wood from UPenn to give the lead and soil presentation, and then we'll talk about next steps and have some time for questions. So first, a little bit about Clean Water Action. We are an environmental advocacy organization that was pretty much founded with the passing of the 1972 Clean Water Act, and we've done local, state, and federal advocacy, environmental advocacy since then. And I would say right now in Philly, our campaign focuses are pollution, environmental justice, and zero waste. And we do these in a few different ways. First with legislation and then with community programs. So Grace is going to put a link in the chat to some places that you can take action on Clean Water Action statewide advocacy. The main ones right now that we have are lead-free water in Pennsylvania schools, environmental justice, and then protecting firefighters from PFAS. You can read more about those as well as take action on the link in the chat. And then next, our community programs. Our office in Philly and then also Clean Water nationally has tons of community programs, but I would say our most active ones in Philly right now are the Resilient Communities Stormwater Initiative, Rethink Disposable, and the Lead Hazard Awareness Program. Specifically about lead, I can give a little bit of background. This program was started with the mission of empowering residents to both identify and live safely with the existence of lead hazards in their homes and communities. And we do this in a couple ways. So first, of course, the webinar series that you're on today. Thanks for being here. And then the next I want to focus on are the 20-minute Living Safely with Lead presentations, and then our tabling and resource sharing. So for anyone who's a part of a neighborhood advisory group, a community-based organization, CDC, any just like local group, if you happen to do like monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly meetings where you get folks together, we would love to come and present our Living Safely with Lead presentation at any of those. It takes about 20 minutes, but we can shorten it or make it longer if you have more or less time. And this really takes the webinar sessions and shortens them down, takes key parts from each and makes them 20 minutes. So we're able to reach a lot of people this way. So let us know if you want to schedule one of those. And then similarly, if you are ever putting on an event or a resource fair and you want groups to come and table, we're happy to bring all of our Living Safely with Lead resources to get the message out to residents. And then Adrian's going to talk a bit more about this, but we're also working on playing a supporting role in UPenn's Lead and Soil campaign. And then next, a little bit about Adrian before we get started. So she initially got started with getting a bachelor's in science in biology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, then went on to get a master's of public health from UPenn, and is currently the program coordinator of the Community Engagement Corps at the Center of Excellence in Environmental Toxicology at the University of Pennsylvania. And here she works closely with community organizations, healthcare professionals, and researchers to build strong partnerships and promote inclusive participation in environmental health. And so now I'll just kick it over to Adrian to go over lead in soil and dust.
Great, thank you so much. Share my screen. Okay, perfect. Okay, so hi, I'm Adrian, and I will be talking all about lead and lead in soil and dust in Philadelphia. And so first, what we're going to go over today is how lead contaminates soil, how lead gets into soil, and then we'll talk about how you get exposed to lead through soil and dust, the current regulations on lead in soil and dust, how we test for lead in soil and interpreting these results, and then just a little bit about what we've done with lead in soil in Philadelphia. So first, we'll talk about how lead gets into soil. So lead does naturally occur in soil at very low concentrations. But in the city and in Philadelphia, we find these very elevated levels of lead in soil. And that is primarily due to the prior use of lead-based paint, the prior use of leaded gasoline, the presence of lead mines and smelters that were in the city, and then other industries that use lead. So I'll go into a little bit about each of these. So first, lead-based paint. So what we're mostly concerned about with soil is this flaking exterior paint on really old buildings. So walking around Philly, you'll see buildings that kind of look like this with this kind of flaking exterior paint. And what happens is it kind of chips off the building and enters into the soil and then just continues to break down. And lead-based paint is really present in any home built before 1978, when lead paint was banned. And that is a lot of the properties in Philly. A lot of the homes were built before lead-based paint was banned. This is a map of Philadelphia, and the darker the shade of the zip code, the higher percentage of chance that those properties will have lead-based paint. And when you compare this map to the map of children with elevated blood lead levels, it pretty much matches up. So these areas of the city where the housing is really old, we find a lot of children with elevated blood lead levels. And this is, we think, a lot due to the condition of the paint and condition of the homes. The other reason that there is a lot of lead in soil is the prior use of leaded gasoline. So lead was added to gasoline in the 1920s, despite there being acknowledgement of the dangers of lead at the time. And why this was a problem is it was kind of released by the cars and then kind of settled into the soil surrounding on the side of highways. So really old highways will have higher concentrations of lead kind of on the banks. Thankfully, this was phased out over time. Starting in 1970s, they kind of started decreasing the amount of lead in gasoline. Catalytic converters were added, which required lead-free gas. And then kind of into the 80s and the 90s, and then finally in 1996, the Clean Air Act banned the sale of leaded fuel for on-road vehicle use. It is still used in some very specific machinery. And it was really impactful, though. You can see as the years go by, this map shows the amount of lead use in gasoline going down, and then the mean blood lead levels of children going down too. And it's estimated that around 68 million children had toxic exposure to lead from leaded gasoline from about the 20s to the 80s. So it really had a large impact, and the response really had a large impact on decreasing blood lead levels. But the problem is that, lead is, it's a metal, it's an element, it doesn't go away, it doesn't break down in the soil. So all that lead that used to be used in gasoline is still kind of on the banks of these highways. And so they're estimated about 4 to 5 million metric tons of lead previously used in gasoline is still in concentrations along the highway. So this is a problem in Philly. We have really old roads. And so this is a lot of the research that we do is on these really old roads and kind of where we find lead and soil along these roads. And then the other exposure is lead smelters and other industries. So there used to be a lot of lead smelting sites in the United States. There were over 600. And the problem with these is that the emissions go into the air and then they can travel a little bit and then settle into the surrounding soil. And if you know anything about Philly, the industry is right in the middle of the city. And so it can really impact people's homes and communities. And so this is a map of kind of where all the smelters were in Philly. So all these little orange dots. We actually had more lead smelters than any other U.S. city. This was, the Inquirer did a whole article on this a couple of years ago. And so if you even look closer, this is kind of the Kensington, Port Richmond area. There was a very high concentration of these lead smelters in that area. And for that, we find a lot of lead in soil in that area. And also there was, other industry, there was a lead paint production facility. This is Aramingo Ave in North Philly. And they did a study and they tested the soil around the banks of this, and they find really high levels, 10,000, 5,000. The natural level of lead in soil is under 100. So these are really elevated. And the study found that children living in this area were 6 times more likely to have elevated blood lead levels compared to the US population. So definitely very impactful for the community in that area. And then also a big industry that I have to mention is the former PES refinery. So this is no longer in operation, of course, after it had the explosion in 2019 and shut down, but it is still a hazardous waste cleanup site. They are still trying to clean this up. The soil was very contaminated with lead and other metals and other things. So this is a big exposure for the people living right around the area of the refinery. So all these are homes here around the fence line. And so now, how do you get exposed to lead through soil and dust? It's one thing for the lead to be in the soil, but in order to be actually impactful for us, we have to get exposed to it in some way. And this is primarily through ingestion. So accidental kind of hand to mouth, you have soil on your hands, you put your hands in your mouth. A little bit from inhalation, which we'll talk about. So primarily we think of children playing in lead contaminated soil, kids getting the soil on their hands, putting their hands in their mouth, getting it on their toys, bringing the toys inside. So any child kind of like hand to mouth, accidentally ingesting the soil. And then of course, tracking soil into the home through your shoes or other items. Inhaling lead dust, this could be outside or inside the home, and then contact with surfaces that might have lead dust on it. So we think of like opening and closing windows that were painted with lead-based paint and having the dust on your hands and then putting your hands in your mouth. So a little bit more about the inhalation. So this is definitely a problem when we think about homes being demolished. In Philly, you've probably seen some sites like this where construction isn't done properly. They're supposed to kind of wet down the dust. But these homes, like I said, are really old, and so they probably have multiple layers of lead-based paint. So when they're knocked down, the dust may contain lead, and then you'll accidentally breathe that in. So this is definitely a problem in areas that are being gentrified, and there's a lot of homes that are being demolished and rebuilt. And then also dust in the home. So like I said, the windowsills that are painted with lead-based paint, like doors that are open and closed, kind of surfaces that have a lot of friction that will create a lot of dust. But also renovations. So if you're knocking down a wall or you're having painting done where they have to scrape old paint, you'll find a lot of dust that's created by that. The EPA has a regulation that if you live in a home with lead-based paint, you're supposed to have a lead certified contractor. So they will kind of like this person here, they'll put coverings up, they'll wear protective gear to protect themselves. So this is one way to ensure that you don't become exposed to lead through renovations, but it's definitely a major source of lead dust in the home is unsafe renovations. And so just some easy steps that you can take to reduce your exposure to lead from soil. Really be good about hand washing. If your kids are outside playing, washing your hands after, washing toys if they've been in the soil, cleaning dusty surfaces with like a wet mop or wipe, not kind of like a regular broom or a duster that'll just spread the lead dust around your home. And then, removing shoes before entering the house, really anything to prevent soil from getting inside the house. If you work with soil or you work in an industry, maybe washing your work clothes separately from your other clothes, hiring a lead safe certified contractor to do renovations safely. And then if you find that if you live in an older home with chipping exterior paint, or you think there might be a lot of lead in the soil, just covering it with, mulch or a thick grass cover, anything that will prevent direct contact, hand to soil is always a good idea. And so now a little bit about the current regulations. So there are regulations on soil. It recently got lowered by the EPA last year from 400 to 200 parts per million for they consider bare soil in play areas. And there's also regulations on dust on floors in the home and dust on windowsills. And so I'll talk more about how we test soil in the home, soil, but dust can be tested by an EPA. There's EPA certified lead dust sampling technicians. And you can actually find these online, and I can put the link in the chat later. But you can go online to this EPA website, say you want dust sampling, and it'll find certified firms that do that. I can come to your home and do that. So now how we test for lead in soil. It's really easy. We have done a lot of soil sampling around the city of Philly. I'll show you our map in a little bit. But we just do it with a little plastic bag, a little spoon. You gather a couple scoops of soil in the bag and you send it to us. And we actually test it with this. It's called an XRF, an X-ray fluorescence. We use a handheld one. And we're able to test it. It just takes about a couple minutes per sample, and it's really easy, and it'll tell you how much lead is in the soil. And we have a video on our website and kind of an information sheet on how to collect soil samples for lead testing, which will be shared with you. But it's really easy, so anyone can really do it if they're interested in how much lead is in their soil. And so interpreting the results, so like I said, the EPA level is 200, but that's not, we don't think of that as being, the most protective. So we think anything really under 100 is, very low. You don't need to really do anything with that soil. That's pretty natural. But you, however, remain aware that there are other sources of lead that may exist. About 100 to 400, just remember, keep washing your hands. Maybe discourage play for very young children. And if you're growing vegetables in this, maybe, make sure to wash them really good, or, don't compost or things like that. Once it gets up to kind of a 400 to 1,000, we really would recommend covering that soil with grass or mulch, restricting access to children. And for gardens, don't grow vegetables or root crops, and really be good about peeling them, and really would recommend doing raised beds. And then high lead over 1,000, we really would recommend, not gardening in the soil, don't allowing children to come in contact with the soil. And if it's really high, what we'll usually do is we'll try to do a lot more soil sampling in that area to see kind of how much the contamination is spread, and then we'll kind of adjust that on an individual level. And so just like a special note for gardening, the actual plant uptake of lead is pretty low, so they don't actually absorb a lot of the lead. The main concern is accidentally eating the soil that's on the plant. So the highest risk are carrots and potatoes that actually grow in the soil. Then, leafy vegetables that grow kind of right on the soil. And then a lower risk would be like tomatoes and peppers that grow. There is a little bit of plant uptake, but they found that the more concerning thing is contact with the soil and accidentally eating the soil that's on the plant. And so just ways to reduce exposure to lead through gardening, if it's like a leafy vegetable, just throw away kind of the outer leaves that may have soil on them, really scrubbing the vegetables well with the brush to remove the dirt, peeling all the root crops to get all the dirt off. And then protect yourself, wearing gloves, washing your hands after you're gardening, gardening, and then especially gardening in raised beds with non-contaminated soil. I think in Philly, we generally recommend that everyone uses raised beds because there are other things in the soil besides lead. And then, so a little bit about what we've been doing with lead and soil in Philadelphia. And so we have an online soil map, which the link is in this presentation, but I can also send it in the chat. And we have over 4,000 samples currently on the map. Most of them are in Philly, a couple outside in Delaware County, and a little bit in Montgomery County. But most of these are from Penn undergraduate and graduate classes, and then community soil workshops. About 1,000 of these, 1,300, are from the EPA. That they had sent us, but we have been working for over since I've been here, probably like 8 or 9 years building this map. And so a lot of these are from, people sending us their samples, doing community workshops. And so it's really been a process over the past few years. And so just to zoom in, this is kind of, the Kensington Fishtown area, and we have a lot of samples in this area. And that's because of all the industrial past that I mentioned earlier. A lot of industry was in this area, so a lot of students and people are worried about lead in their soil. And so the bigger and the darker the color, the more lead was present in that soil sample. So you can see there was kind of a lot of lead in soil in this area. And then I also zoomed in. This is West Philly. So this is Penn here. And then this is kind of west going into Southwest Philly. And we've also had a lot of samples here because of all that really old housing that I mentioned. And so a lot of these are probably due to that flaking exterior paint, or maybe a little bit because Baltimore Ave is a pretty old road, some of the old leaded gasoline that's still in the soil. So if you are interested in getting your soil tested, we do free soil testing whenever. People can just email me and they can send me their samples in the mail, or they can drop them off at our building, and we will test them for free and send you the results and talk to you about kind of what the results mean and if there's anything that you can do to reduce your exposure to lead. I will stop sharing. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. That was a lot of really useful and helpful information. I'm going to share my screen just for one more minute to give a little bit of next steps, and then we can open it up for questions.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Hi, hi, Mercedes and
Hi.
Adrian. Thank you for the presentation. Could you, if possible, put the information back of the slide for the free sample testing for the soil?
Yeah, actually I'll put my my email in the chat so you can
Okay.
email me.
All right, cool.
Mhm.
Sorry for the way my computer's being a little bit slow, but I'll get my screen
Yes.
shared really quick.
Good. And if you go to the Philadelphia Water Department, you have a free template for the planters. So it's something that you can check also. Okay. Here we have an EPA program, and we cover that information so with the students. So, but it's available on the Philadelphia Water Department, PWD.
Okay, great. Thank you. So really quick, some next steps. So the next two webinars are going to be the same time, the next two Wednesdays. Next week we have lead and renovation, repair, and paint, which I think Hugo and Juliet, who are both on this call, are going to be giving. And then the following week will be tenants' rights in Philadelphia's lead abatement law, which I think Lydia is also on this call. She's going to be giving that presentation. And then feel free to join for those. And then next, I'm going to be trying potentially this Friday to send out the previous slides and recordings from this session and then the last two. If anyone missed it, or if you just want to share it with your network, I'll be sending those out this week. And then next, of course, you're always welcome to take action. Grace put the link in the chat to the lead-free water bill that Clean Water Action is advocating for. And then the Lead Free Promise Project is also advocating for a bill that would mandate lead testing in children at ages 1 and 2. And so we'll put that link in the chat as well, so you can always take action to further protect yourself. And those are pretty much all the next steps. And so if anyone has any questions or other thoughts to share, feel free to raise your hand, put it in the chat, put yourself off mute, whichever works. Sarah?
I have a question about testing lead in soil. So if I can't get a sample to you in some way, is there a recommended like at-home sample tester that I could use? And is there a significant difference in like what it'll show me? Like, is it really, if like, should I really get to the university, or is it okay to do an at-home sample?
Yeah, I don't know of any at-home ways to test for lead in soil. I know there's like at-home tests for lead in paint, and it's kind of like you wipe it on and it turns like a orange color if there's lead in paint. But this is like a X-ray device, and so it's like picking up the elements of, you know, the heavy metals in the soil. So yeah, that's really the only way that I know that we do lead in soil. So yeah, so if you want to know, you can always send it to me. But you can also always assume that there's maybe a little bit of lead in your soil if you live in Philadelphia. So, you know, be careful. Anyways.
Thank you.
And then also, I was gonna say, if you ever go to any like Clean Water Action event, if you wanna like, if you, I don't know, register for any of our events, if you wanna just bring, like, you can just bring a soil sample there, and I'll get it to Adrian if that's like easier for anyone. If you come to any of our events, we can collect it for you and get it to Adrian. Emily?
Hi, I was curious if the EPA or any other federal government related organizations are doing any work on testing lead? Because I know you said, Adrian, that like the EPA sent you samples, but I'm just kind of curious if like you might not know the answer to this, but if they've taken any steps to, I don't know, either get more testing done or like influence and educate people. Like, I don't know. I'm just curious. I think the work that you guys are doing is amazing. And I'm curious how the EPA might compare if they're doing anything.
Yeah, they definitely do. I think there's a whole division of the EPA that's dedicated to lead, and they definitely do a lot of soil testing. I think it's more like if they know a site is contaminated, they'll go out and they'll do a lot of testing in that area. I'm not sure they do as much kind of community, just anyone who's interested in having their soil tested. But they're definitely involved in like, you know, sites that maybe they were industry or contaminated maybe public areas like parks or things like that. They're definitely involved with going out and testing that soil. So we definitely have worked with them, and also ATSVR a lot in the city to do soil workshops.
Great. And then, Oren?
Hi, Adrian. Thank you. I was curious about the legal levels. I had a question about the legal levels. So obviously, as recommendations for the legal level or the recommended level for lead changes, it takes a while for that to be implemented into um, the, the legislation. So I'm wondering if there's a different body or agency that kind of provides those levels besides the EPA or something along those lines, besides maybe seat at UPenn, or if those are the main kind of bodies that determine those things.
Yeah, so the EPA has a level, and then each state kind of has their own level. So ours is the PA Department of Environmental Protection has been aligned with the EPA, but some states like California, their level is like 80, or some other states that are kind of more ahead of the curve. The problem with the legal kind of limits is like, you know, with housing, you have to you know, you have to disclose if there's like lead in the paint, and it's like a legal requirement that they fix the lead in the paint. There is no like legal requirement for houses to not have lead in soil. They don't really do enforcement on that. So it's kind of more of like a recommendation from what I understand. People aren't really going out and like, oh, I have to clean up this soil based on the legal limits. But yeah, so
Got it.
states do have some kind of say in that too.
Is there, can you just find that information on a state's website?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Great, thank you. And then Patricia?
I'm sorry, I got on very late because it was impossible to get onto AOL for me. I live in the Roxborough area, and I don't know what the quality of soil is. I couldn't tell from your map. I did hear something quickly on about scrubbing everything down, all of your vegetables and fruit. Is that only stuff that's grown here? I get most of mine either from ShopRite or Target. And I had heard something about you're not supposed to wash all of your vegetables with detergent. You're just supposed to rinse them off, your vegetables and fruit. So what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to scrub them down with detergent now, or is it okay just to rinse them off with water?
Rinsing with water is probably fine.
I should be,
So,
okay.
just get all the soil off. If you think that it looks really dirty, maybe scrub extra hard, but I think it's okay.
Okay, thank you. Is anybody else having a hard time getting onto AOL today? I have all of these things where I have to redo it.
Well, I'm so glad that you were able to join. And then Kevin?
Adrian and Mercedes, thanks for teaching me today. I was curious, Adrian, if you know anything about the topsoil industry. I have had opportunities where I have suggested people put new topsoil over their existing topsoil, but where does Bob the landscaper go and get his topsoil, and how do we know it's not more toxic than the topsoil we have there already? And do you know anything about the bags that I go and buy at my local hardware store? Does anybody actually do any surveillance of that product?
I have definitely gotten soil samples where the soil that you buy in the store has a very distinct look, and I'm like, oh, this is soil that someone bought in a store, and they're sending it to me, and it's always very low, none detected for lead or any other metals. In terms of other things in the soil, like maybe plastics or other things, I'm not sure about that. But any of the topsoil that I've tested that is bought soil has always been very low in lead or none at all. But yeah, that's a really good point, because we do recommend, mixing or adding in bought soil, but if there's actually regulations on what's in that soil, I'm not actually sure. So that's a great question. That'd be a good project for someone to do. And I saw your comment too about the fires and the exposure of lead from burning buildings, and that's definitely something that we're thinking about and looking into that based on like where our map is and soil samples that we have and where there have been fires. So that's really good research project too.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So feel free, anyone, raise your hand if you have any other questions or put it in the chat. I was curious because I know online you have instructions on how to collect a soil sample for testing. And since we have some time, I was curious if you wouldn't mind just like explaining to us like how to do that.
Yeah, so the general thing is, so really we just do like a little plastic baggie because we test right through the bag. And preferably like a plastic spoon or a bamboo spoon, not a metal spoon, just in case any kind of trace metals come off in the sampling process. But we generally recommend kind of sampling a little bit in a couple of different areas. So we kind of imagine like drawing like a big X on the ground, maybe like a foot long each way, and then taking a little bit from each corner and then in the middle. Because lead can really vary from, just within inches. Like maybe there's a little piece of lead-based paint in that part of the soil and not in that part. So we really kind of want to take a little bit from a couple different areas and then put it in the bag. Only need, a couple tablespoons worth of soil to get a test. So it doesn't take a lot. Please don't send me like a gallon of soil. That's really would take a lot longer to test and not be as helpful. So yeah, super easy. Then we recommend either putting an address on there, your name and some contact information so that we can get back to you with the results. We do add all the results to our map. And so if you don't want, your exact address being on our map for any reason, you can just do like cross streets or, just tell us you don't want it to be added on the map. One way is also you can do coordinates. And so that's pretty easy to do on your phone. We kind of show how to do that. But if you like zoom in on your like Apple Maps or Google Maps and drop a pin, it will give you coordinates then at the bottom. But we can also get it from your address too. But yeah, so then just collect as many as you want. It really doesn't matter. I'm always going and testing, so it doesn't really matter if you want to send 10 samples or just a couple samples. So always open to that. And if you have any questions, you can always email me. But there is an instruction sheet, and I think our website got sent in the chat. And on that, there's the video and the instruction sheet.
Okay, great. Sounds good. I've been telling people like feel free to grab a soil sample from like your backyard, but also like let your neighbors know. And then if you want to test like your local park where you're spending a lot of time at too, like that's always great.
Yeah, definitely. Please don't go onto like, private property and get samples. We've had, I was doing a presentation with a seniors group, and some of them were like, I was walking onto these schools and getting samples and the principals were yelling at me. I was like, oh, please don't do that. If a kid, if there's someone that goes to that school and you want to ask permission, please do that. But yeah, I know it's tempting. You want to test like the industry's, soil, but maybe across the street at a park or something like that.
Okay, any other thoughts or questions? I'm assuming, Oren, you can't put your hand down again. No problem, no problem. But yeah, any other questions while we're here? Feel free to raise your hand, put them in the chat. Emily?
Adrian, I'm kind of interested in why you feel like called to do this work and what in your career brought you to doing this and like where you hope it might lead one day. I just find it really interesting that you're doing this and you're part of SEAT, and I would like to hear a little bit of your story.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually I moved from North Carolina to Philly to get my master's. And I was really just kind of interested in public health in general. And then unfortunately, living in Philly and studying in Philly, you learn a lot about the environmental health impacts that, Philadelphians face. And it was just really intriguing. And I just actually took a class that was taught by my now boss, Dr. Howarth, on environmental health, and was just kind of really interested in it. And I really like public health because you can improve people's health without them even having to be involved in the process, which I think is awesome. The less people can do and be healthier, I think is amazing. Make the healthy choice the easy choice is what they say. So yeah, I just really liked it, and I love the environment, and I want it to be healthy, and I want people to, enjoy being outside and be outside in a safe way. So air pollution, is something that we do a lot about, and water quality and soil. And yeah, I just think it's all really interesting. And the job that I have at SEAT really gets me to do a bunch of different things and to work with different people. So I get to work with students and healthcare workers and policymakers. And so it's, there's a lot of different things that I get to do day to day. It keeps it interesting. Yeah, so I've been enjoying it. I've actually been in SEAT for almost 6 years, which is crazy, but I've enjoyed it.
Amazing. Thanks so much for telling us. And then Grace?
Hi, Adrian. Just kind of backpacking off of Emily's question. I'm kind of interested to know like what other kinds of like projects and issues you work on like at SEAT with your peers, and if you do testing for like other types of chemicals in the soil and anything like that.
Yeah, actually, something else we're doing with soil recently is we work a lot in Chester, which is just south of Philadelphia, kind of past the airport. And there's a group of community members who are really concerned because they live right behind a crematorium, so someplace that cremates bodies. And they're noting like all this ash is entering into the air. We think it's falling into our soil. We think we're breathing it in. And one thing that we did, so I went down and collected a bunch of soil samples, and we're actually going to look for mercury, because bodies are supposed to have all their like dental fillings and everything removed for the cremation process. And so we're going to look to make sure that that is happening and try to see if there's any kind of exposure happening with the ash entering into their backyards and stuff. So I haven't tested those samples yet. I'm very anxious to kind of see what it looks like in the soil, because we kind of did like a close perimeter and then a little bit further away to see if it kind of decreases as you get further away. So that's something else we're doing with soil. In terms of other projects, we do a lot of kind of air monitoring projects. So we're doing one in Delaware County. They're setting up about 40 air monitors like in people's neighborhoods. And so we're kind of working with the state and the Delaware County Health Department to make an online dashboard for community use, and trying to get the community more involved in the air quality and kind of seeing how it changes throughout the neighborhoods. So that's another project we're working on that I think is really exciting, and students can get involved with, and it's kind of very, community friendly, and one way that we can kind of share data with the community.
Okay, cool. Any other questions, thoughts, anything else before we close? Okay. Well, me and Adrian can also stay on for one more minute if anyone else wants to stay and ask a question. But other than that, just thank you all so much for joining today. Thanks so much for Adrian for giving us such a good presentation. And then look out for an email from me with the previous recordings and slides. And then don't forget the next 2 webinars, which will be the next 2 following Wednesdays. All right. Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi. Do you have a question or anything? You're
I think
muted.
you're muted.
Yes, how you doing? I just want to maybe offer services for if you have people interested for the rice beds. Okay, we are doing it here at our training center, but also have done it for other people too. So if you got anybody interested in the Philadelphia area, just let me know. Okay, so we can provide that service. And interesting about this lead in the soil. So I wasn't aware that a lot of that, number one, was from lead-based paint. We did 40 houses around Philadelphia about 2 years ago for lead-based painting, and 38 of those houses were positive for lead-based paint.
Yeah.
So, yes, all around the city. So,
yeah.
so
Unfortunately.
I was really surprised because I thought it was lower, but I only have been doing this for about 4 or 5 years. So I'm learning. So thank you for your information too. Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.